May 5th, 1945. The Tyrolean Alps, Austria. The war in Europe has less than 72 hours left. Adolf Hitler is dead in his bunker. The German Wehrmacht is surrendering by the thousands. But on a steep hill near the village of Itter, a medieval fortress remains occupied. This is Castle Itter. Why did this fortress become a battlefield? At first glance, a prison. But in reality, a fortress of political value. Inside the stone walls, the SS is holding high-ranking French prisoners, 2 former prime ministers, 2 former commanders-in-chief of the French army, a tennis star. These are the most valuable hostages in the Third Reich. The situation is desperate. The SS guards have fled the castle, but a fanatical division of the Waffen-SS is moving in to execute the prisoners. The Frenchmen are trapped. They have no weapons. They have no way out. The footage would have looked impossible. If a camera panned the castle walls, it would show a scene of pure chaos. American infantrymen are crouched behind stone battlements. They are firing Garand rifles. Directly next to them, German soldiers in Wehrmacht uniforms are reloading MG-42 machine guns. They are not fighting each other. They are aiming down the hill at the same target. The sound of incoming mortar fire echoes through the valley. The Germans and Americans are shoulder to shoulder. This is the only time in the entire conflict that the United States Army and the German Army fought as allies. Who led this suicide mission? Captain Jack Lee. He is an American tank commander who looks like a Hollywood lead. He smokes cigars and commands a single Sherman tank named Besatten Jenny. His partner is Major Josef Gangl. Gangl is a decorated German officer who has seen enough blood. He has turned against the Nazi regime to protect his men and the civilians in the valley. Events accelerated. The SS reached the base of the hill. They brought 88mm anti-tank guns and hundreds of veteran troops. The defenders have only 1 tank and limited ammunition. The Sherman tank sits at the main gate. It serves as a steel shield, firing its main gun until the barrel glows. The sound of metal hitting stone is constant. The Besatten Jenny takes a direct hit from a German shell and bursts into flames. The defenders are pushed back into the inner courtyard. The camera records the aftermath, scorched earth and shattered stone. There was no mistake. The SS meant to kill everyone. Gangl moves to pull a French politician out of the line of fire. A sniper's bullet hits him. He dies instantly. But this was only the beginning of the end. As the SS prepared for the final rush, the sound of trumpets and sirens filled the air. The American 103rd Infantry Division arrived. The SS vanished into the woods. Thus ended the strangest battle of the war. The prisoners survived. The American captain earned the Distinguished Service Cross. The German major became a national hero in Austria. The story of enemies becoming brothers closed with the smoke of a burning Sherman. Castle Itter was not a standard prison. It was a luxury cage. The Nazis converted the medieval fortress into a high-security facility for honor prisoners. These were high-profile French VIPs held as political leverage. Inside the walls were the men who once controlled the French Republic. Édouard Daladier, the former prime minister. Paul Reynaud, another former prime minister. General Maxime Weygand, the former head of the French army. Even Jean Borotra, a world-famous tennis star. Why were these men kept together? The Germans wanted them as bargaining chips. But in reality, the prisoners were a divided front. They hated the Germans, but they also despised each other. For years, they occupied the same halls, arguing over the politics that led to France's defeat. They traded insults while the SS stood guard at the heavy oak doors. At first glance, a safe haven. But in reality, a death trap. May 4th, 1945. The situation changed. The SS commander of the castle, Sebastian Wimmer, watched the horizon. He saw the smoke from the approaching American lines. Wimmer knew the German Reich was collapsing. He faced a deadly dilemma. He had direct orders from Heinrich Himmler. No prisoner leaves the castle alive. If he stayed, he would have to carry out a mass execution. If he was caught by the Americans, he would face a gallows. Wimmer made a choice. He didn't issue orders. He didn't pack his bags. He simply vanished. Following May 4th, 1945, they found the solution in the most unlikely place. A few miles away, in the town of Wörgl, Major Josef Gangl was trying to keep his men alive. Gangl was a Wehrmacht officer. He was a regular army soldier and a decorated hero of the Russian front. But he was also anti-Nazi. For months, he'd been secretly feeding intelligence to the Austrian resistance. The situation was critical. Gangl knew the SS planned to blow up the town's bridges and fight to the death. He wanted to save the town from destruction. He wanted to save his men from a pointless massacre. He was looking for someone to surrender to. Then a messenger arrived from Itter Castle. A Czech cook had managed to ride a bicycle directly through the SS lines. He delivered a desperate message. The French leaders were trapped. The SS was coming to execute them. Gangl faced a dilemma. He could not fight the SS alone. He lacked the heavy weapons and the manpower. But he refused to let the SS murder the French WWIIs. To him, it was a stain on German military honor. Gangl made a radical decision. He grabbed a white flag. He jumped into his Kubelwagen, a light German utility vehicle. He drove straight toward the American lines. He was not looking for a battle. He was looking for an ally. 8 miles away, in the town of Kufstein, the United States 12th Armored Division had just arrived. Leading the reconnaissance unit was Captain John Jack Lee. Lee was the definition of a tank commander. He was tough, loud, and constantly chomped on a cigar. He looked like he belonged on a Hollywood movie set. His men respected his aggression. Lee was resting his tank, a Sherman named Besotten Jenny. Suddenly, a German vehicle approached flying a white flag. Lee placed his hand on his pistol holster, but the German officer did not reach for a weapon. He stopped and saluted. It was Major Gangl. The two men stood in the middle of the road. Gangl explained the situation in broken English. He told Lee about the French prisoners and the approaching SS units. He offered to join forces. At first glance, a surrender, but in reality, a recruitment. Lee looked at Gangl. A German major was asking to go back into combat alongside the Americans. It smelled like a trap, but Lee was a gambler who lived for the unconventional. He chewed his cigar and stared at the map spread out on the hood of the car. He made his choice. "All right, Fritz," Lee said. "Let's go get them." There was no turning back. Lee began checking his ammunition counts and calling for his crew. The plan was set. They were going to save the prisoners together. The footage would have shown a sight never seen before, American Shermans and German soldiers moving out in the same column. Thus began the most strange alliance of the war. Captain Lee radioed his headquarters at 1400 hours. The message was clear. He was launching a rescue mission to Castle Itter. He informed his superiors that he was taking the German major with him. The command staff believed the plan was insane. However, they granted him the green light. Lee did not hesitate. He immediately organized a small strike force. The unit consisted of 2 Sherman tanks and 7 American infantrymen. Major Gangl provided a truck filled with Wehrmacht soldiers. This created the strangest convoy of the entire war. 1 American tank took the lead position. A German transport truck followed closely behind. Together, they drove directly into territory controlled by the Waffen-SS. The road to the castle was narrow and winding. They encountered multiple SS roadblocks constructed from fallen timber and stone. Lee did not slow down. The tank, named Besotten Jenny, fired its main cannon and blasted the obstacles aside. The German soldiers in the truck leaned over the rails. They fired their Mauser rifles at the SS guards. The convoy fought its way to the main gate. The French WWIIs emerged from the stone keep. They expected to see a massive American relief column. Instead, the scene was different. They saw 1 damaged tank and 7 Americans. Behind them stood a squad of German soldiers. The French leaders were visible in the courtyard, looking around in confusion. They asked where the rest of the army was located. Captain Lee climbed out of the turret. He did not offer a formal salute. He simply grinned. He told them that he was the entire army. Lee immediately took command of the situation. His rank was captain, but he treated the former French prime ministers like low-level privates. He gave direct orders. He told them to get inside the thick stone walls. He ordered them to stay away from the windows. The footage would show Lee directing the placement of heavy armor. He parked the Besotten Jenny directly in front of the main gate to block the entrance. He ordered the gunner to keep the barrel aimed at the road. The defense was organized in minutes. He positioned the German soldiers along the high walls. He moved his American infantry into the towers. He turned to Major Gangl. Lee told the major to watch the south wall while he stayed at the gate. The German major gave a formal salute. The tension between the two sides vanished for a moment. On the ramparts, German and American soldiers stood side by side. They shared cigarettes. It was 1945. Events accelerated. The SS began their counterattack. The soldiers shared their final rations and checked the bolts on their weapons. They cleaned their rifles and counted their remaining rounds of ammunition. Every man understood the situation. When the sun rose over the mountains, they would likely die in this castle. May 5th, 1945. The morning fog began to lift from the valley floor. Then, a single rifle shot broke the silence. The SS had arrived. 150 soldiers from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division emerged from the tree line. They carried mortars, heavy machine guns, and anti-tank weapons. They were not here to negotiate. The SS commanders looked at the castle gates. They saw an American Sherman tank blocking the entrance. Next to the Americans stood Major Gangl and his German soldiers firing down from the ramparts. To the SS, Gangl was not a soldier anymore. He was a traitor. The assault began. They focused every weapon on the stone walls. In the footage, dust and stone chips fly from the masonry. The French WWIIs refused to take cover in the cellar. Paul Reynaud and Édouard Daladier grabbed infantry rifles and took positions at the windows. Jean Borotra, the world-famous tennis star, joined the firing line. But the SS brought a heavier solution. They rolled an 88mm anti-tank gun into position. The crew aimed at the American tank, the Besotten Jenny. One shell struck the hull. The tank exploded into a fireball. The American crew scrambled out of the hatch seconds before the interior became a furnace. The defenders' only heavy weapon was gone. Now, it was a battle of rifles against an organized army. Captain Lee moved between the defensive positions. He did not yell. He remained calm. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his last cigar, and cut the fuse. Lee looked at his men. He told them not to worry. He said the SS had to come through the gate, and they would pile the bodies up like cordwood. Events accelerated. The SS moved closer to the walls. There was no turning back. "4 hours of constant fire. The defenders reached for their pouches and found them empty. The SS moved through the tree line, inching toward the castle walls. They were preparing for the final breach. Major Josef Gangl stood on the ramparts, directing the remaining fire. He spotted French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud standing in the open, completely exposed to sniper fire. Gangl did not hesitate. He ran toward the politician. "Get down!" he shouted. He shoved Reynaud to the floor. A single sniper bullet struck Gangl in the chest. He collapsed instantly. The German officer died protecting a French politician. He fell while fighting alongside Americans against the fanatics of his own nation. He was the only defender to lose his life during the siege. The hero of the battle wore a Wehrmacht uniform. The defense was collapsing. The Sherman tank, Besotten Jenny, was a burning wreck. The SS concentrated their forces for the final assault. Why did the relief column take so long? It seemed the defenders were destined to die in the courtyard, but a tennis star had a different plan. 1,300 hours. Captain Jack Lee checked his magazine. He was almost dry. The radio inside the destroyed tank was silent. There was no way to call for help. Jean Borotra, the world-famous tennis champion, stepped forward. "I will go," he said. "I am fast. I can run." It was a suicide mission. Borotra did not wait for a debate. He vaulted over the stone wall and hit the ground running. He sprinted across an open field in full view of the enemy. The SS opened fire. Bullets kicked up clouds of dust around his boots. He dodged and weaved through the dirt. He reached the tree line and disappeared. He ran for miles until he hit the main road. He saw the lead tank of an American relief column. Baratra was breathless, covered in sweat. He reached the commander. "The castle!" he gasped. "They are dying. You must hurry." At the castle, the situation was critical. The SS reached the main gate. They set the charges. The wood splintered as the gates were blown open. Lee looked at his men. "Fix bayonets," he ordered. He prepared for hand-to-hand combat in the courtyard. The German soldiers defending the walls checked their weapons. Their magazines were empty. Then, a new sound echoed through the valley. It wasn't the rhythm of German MG-42s. It was the roar of heavy engines. Rounding the corner came the 142nd Infantry Regiment. Sherman tanks and hundreds of American infantrymen arrived. They opened fire on the SS positions. The attackers realized they were trapped between the castle and the heavy armor. They scattered into the woods. The siege was broken. The American relief soldiers stormed into the courtyard. They found Captain Jack Lee. His face was blackened by gunpowder and smoke. He looked at the relief commander. He removed a cigar from his mouth. "What took you so long?" he asked. The prisoners were moved out. The French 5 IPs were driven to safety in armored vehicles. Within days, the war in Europe was officially over. Captain Jack Lee received the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions. He returned to New York and opened a hotel. He never bragged about the events at the castle. Major Josef Gangl was buried in the town of Itter. Today, he is honored as a hero in Austria. A street carries his name. He remains the German soldier who died fighting the Nazis. The battle for Castle Itter was a small skirmish, but it proved a point. Even in a global war, humanity survives. Enemies can become allies. Men can choose what is right when the world goes mad. Years later, people asked Jack Lee about that day. He would only smile. "It was the weirdest thing I ever saw," he said. "Me and the Krauts fighting side by side. It remains the only time the US Army and the German Army fought as one. A strange end to a long war. The German officer died to save a French leader. Was he a traitor or a hero? The choice remains yours." Thus ended the battle for the castle.